For 81 days, an American farmer destroyed more tanks than any general, and on the other side, a German engineer realized his war was already lost. Occupied France, August 1944. Dawn breaks heavy over Normandy, humid, thick with the smoke of burned villages and the expectant silence that precedes death. Amid the ruins of a farm and the charred trees that rise like claws against the gray sky, a metallic sound echoes and dies, the gasp of an engine giving its last breath. The German engineer Otto Schulz, a man whose mind lives in a world of calculations and precision, walks slowly, his officer's boots sinking into the thick mud that has already swallowed so many men and machines. Before him, an American M4 Sherman tank, a blackened and twisted carcass, still emits hot, ghostly steam from the barrel of its cannon. The turret is twisted at an unnatural angle, like a broken neck. Schulz does not look at the destroyed machine with anger or triumph. His gaze is that of an anatomist before an unknown body. He examines it with cold, methodical curiosity. He circles the tank, ignoring the smell of burned metal and melted rubber. He pulls a small leather notebook and a perfectly sharpened pencil from his pocket. With precise handwriting, he writes in German, "They have more machines than we have men to destroy them." The war, at that point in history, had ceased to be merely a contest of courage or tactics. It had become a brutal race of gears, steel, logistics, and the industrial capacity of entire nations. A mathematical equation on a continental scale. A few kilometers away, in an improvised trench, a man wipes his soot and sweat-covered face with the back of his hand. He wears a scratched steel helmet, but beneath it, the mark of the Texas sun is still visible on his weathered skin. His name, recorded in the annals of American military history, is Sergeant Lafayette G. Pool, a farmer who traded the plow for an M10 tank destroyer cannon. Before the war, his world was the cycle of the land: plant, tend, harvest. He repaired John Deere tractors with an intuition passed down from generations of men who lived off the earth. Now, he hunts Panzer IV tanks with the same practical reasoning he used to diagnose a sputtering engine. To him, an enemy tank is not a steel monster. It is a mechanical problem to be solved, permanently. He takes a deep drag from a crumpled cigarette and surveys the open field ahead. The gentle hills of France, full of treacherous shadows, hide enemies he cannot see, but whose smell of diesel and metal he senses in the air. "You always reap what you sow," he mutters to himself, smoke escaping between his teeth. Lafayette Pool's reputation already precedes him. From D-Day in Normandy to the offensive toward the Siegfried line, action reports confirm that his unit was responsible for the destruction of an astonishing number of enemy armored vehicles. The Germans, intercepted on radios, call him Der Farmergeist, the farmer ghost. To his own men, he is living proof that raw ingenuity and field logic can overcome the enemy's perfect technique and rigid discipline. He does not lead with shouts, but with questions. Where will the sun be in an hour? Where is the mud deepest? Where does the wind blow from? They are the same questions he would ask before plowing a field. As Lafayette plans his next harvest, Otto Schulz continues his autopsy of the Sherman. He touches the armor, noting the crude weld, almost careless compared to the perfect joints of a German Tiger. He studies the radial engine, an adaptation of an aircraft motor, noisy and thirsty, but incredibly powerful, and above all, simple. The wires are exposed, the parts seem interchangeable, almost generic. Everything appears rough, clumsy, made in haste. And then the truth hits him with the force of a direct impact. It is not carelessness. It is a philosophy. The Americans do not build their machines to be eternal works of art. They build them to never stop coming. If one breaks, another takes its place in hours, not weeks. The engineer closes his notebook. He stares at the smoke rising slowly from the destroyed tank and feels the weight of that discovery. That burned machine did not represent a simple tactical defeat for the Allies. It represented the harbinger of a strategic, almost mathematical defeat for the Third Reich. Meanwhile, Lafayette positions his M10 cannon on top of a hill, camouflaged with branches and netting. The wind carries the familiar smell of oil and iron. Below, a column of German armored vehicles advance along the road, confident in their technical superiority. Lafayette takes a deep breath, adjusts the sight with the calm of someone aligning a fence, and whispers to his gunner, "Wait for the third in line. It's always the commanders. Cut the head off the snake first. Now, harvest time." The shot echoes. A dry, sharp sound that tears through the morning silence. In less than 5 minutes, the road turns into a cemetery of smoking steel. Kilometers away, Schulz hears the distant echo of the explosions. He does not know it, but he's listening to the sound of his own report becoming obsolete, the practical proof of the theory he had just formulated. Two worlds. Two opposing minds united by the same instant of iron and fire. The man who analyzes and the man who acts. Calculation and instinct. Pencil and gunpowder. On that dawn, the documented myth was born of the Texas farmer who refused to be intimidated by the world's most sophisticated war machine. The improvised shed in a recaptured French village smells of rancid oil, metal, and the residual fear of recent combat. Otto Schulz, now with grease-stained hands, works under the light of a single hanging bulb. Before him, completely disassembled, is the Wright R975 radial engine from an M4 Sherman. The parts, methodically organized on the packed dirt floor, are still warm. He cleans a piston with a rag from his uniform, analyzes the fit, and mutters under his breath so no one hears, "It's ugly, it's crude, but it works." He weighs the crankshaft in his hands, heavy, forged without aesthetic concern, almost rude in its simplicity. There is no polishing or elegance like that of a Maybach engine in a Panzer. There is only purpose. Schulz spends hours measuring the pistons, comparing cylinder diameters, sketching the ignition schematic in his notebook. He jots down numbers that make him pause and reread them in disbelief. The American engine's torque, the rotational force at low speeds, was phenomenal. German engines, masterpieces of engineering, were like racehorses, precise, refined, but fragile and requiring constant maintenance. The Sherman's engine was like a bull, not the fastest, but it could drag immense weight through the mud without stopping. In his notes he writes, "They are not winning by speed or armor, they are winning by the ability to apply brute force continuously, by torque." The war was not a sprint, it was a marathon of attrition, and the Americans had built an engine for it. On the other side of the front line, Lafayette G. Pool scans the horizon with a worn pair of binoculars. The wind kicks up dust and ashes from the German tanks his unit destroyed the day before. He whistles a simple tune, a church hymn his mother sang in Texas, nearly forgotten. His men, mostly boys from farms in Ohio, Iowa, and California, reload ammunition, clean gun barrels, and adjust sights with a calm they learned from him. Lafayette walks among them with the naturalness of someone inspecting the fences on his ranch. He does not give complex orders, he tells stories. Remember that Panzer and sent low? It turned left because the ground was firmer. They always choose the easy path. We don't. We wait where the path is hard. He crouches and draws in the dirt with a stick. It is not a tactical map, it is a harvest map. Instead of rows of cotton, he draws columns of enemy tanks. They'll come this way, following the road. Here the ground dips, and last night's rain created a quagmire. The afternoon sun will be right there, blinding their gunner. We don't need to hunt them, we wait and harvest. One of the young soldiers, a 19-year-old boy named Miller, laughs nervously. What if there are too many, Sergeant? Lafayette pauses, lights another cigarette, and blows the smoke slowly. Miller, in the field, you don't worry if the harvest is too big. You just make sure you have enough hands and the machine won't break. We just need to be enough. As he speaks, kilometers away, Schulz disassembles the Sherman suspension system. He finds a simple, absurdly resilient vertical spring structure designed to be repaired in the field. These Americans built their tanks like farm trucks, he thinks, with a mix of contempt and admiration. And that is exactly it. The German engineer's mind, trained to seek perfection and optimization, begins to panic, logically. What he sees is not technical genius in the classical sense, it is philosophical genius. Every bolt, every hose, every armor plate was made to be replaced in minutes, by any soldier with common tools. He notes, with his hand trembling slightly, they turned the battlefield into a mobile assembly line. The factory isn't in Detroit, the factory is here. At that same moment, the radio in Lafayette's pocket crackles. The voice is staticky but clear. Panther on the move, one alone, approaching the northern sector. Command wants you to intercept it. Lafayette looks at the sky. A Panther. They're getting desperate to send one of those alone. He gathers his men. We're not going after it. Let it come. It's heavy. It'll look for the paved road. We'll wait near the old bridge. The sound of the Panther's engine rises like muffled thunder. Lafayette closes his eyes for a second. He has learned to distinguish tank types by the gear noise, by the track clatter. Maybach HL-230 engine, clean sound, but the tracks are clanking. Must have a damaged link. He smiles. Perfect. The Panther, a magnificent and lethal machine, advances. When it crosses the bridge, Lafayette's first M10 shot does not hit the turret or frontal armor. It hits the side of the track, exactly where the sound seemed irregular. With the track broken, the giant tank spins and stops, helpless. The second shot turns it into a ball of fire. As his men cheer, Lafayette watches the wreckage and mutters, "They're good, but they don't learn from mistakes." Schulz, in turn, realizes the same thing by looking at production statistics. For every Panther Germany could manufacture, the United States made 10 Shermans. He closes his eyes. There is no technical solution to that mathematics. The war was already decided on the spreadsheets, and men like Lafayette G. Pool were merely signing the death certificate on the battlefield. September 1944. Autumn covers the roads of France with damp leaves and the smell of burned iron. The sky, low and gray, seems to weigh on the men like a constant reminder of all that has already been lost. Lafayette G. Pool gazes at the horizon, leaning on the hood of a jeep, the map trembling under the cold wind. The engine hums, vibrating under his hands, the same sound as an old tractor on his Texas ranch. He closes his eyes for a moment and feels the distant echo of life before the war, the smell of wet earth, the crackle of fire in the barn, the distant laughter of his wife. But when he opens them again, he sees only smoking hills and tank carcasses slumbering under the mud. The whole world seems to revolve around ruins. The war has changed rhythm. It is no longer made of glorious advances, but of attrition. Mud is the new enemy. Cold, the new commander. Lafayette moves slowly, feeling the weight of months in his body. His men follow with silent respect. His platoon, Company C of the 823rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, has already surpassed the mark of 200 enemy armored vehicles destroyed, many under his direct leadership. But for Lafayette, each number is an invisible scar. He no longer counts victories, he counts survivors. Every burned tank is a field that won't bloom, he thinks. On the other side of the front, Otto Schulz walks down the icy corridor of high command in Berlin. The sound of boots echoes between the marble walls, reflecting the weight of an empire crumbling in silence. He carries under his arm a bulky dossier, months of analyses, calculations, and conclusions no one wants to hear. Upon entering the room, he sees generals lined up, impeccable uniforms, rigid faces, gazes trying to hide fear. One of them, with a monocle and arrogant voice, asks, "What do you have to tell us, engineer?" Schulz stands firm. "That we are losing the war," he replies. A murmur ripples through the room, not for lack of courage, but of screws. The silence is heavy, almost offensive. Schulz opens the dossier. He shows tables, graphs, comparisons. While Germany produces 100 Tiger tanks, the United States produces 1,000 Shermans. While a Panzer needs a week in the workshop, the Sherman is patched in the field and rolls again. "We built masterpieces," he says. "They built tools, and tools win wars." A general arises furious. "Are you praising the enemy?" Schulz stares at him, unafraid. "No, sir, I am describing reality. Perfection is beautiful, but efficiency is invincible." He is dismissed like a madman. He leaves the room, knowing he has just signed his own condemnation. Meanwhile, Lafayette and his men face an incessant storm in the Hurtgen forest. The wind cuts faces like blades. The rain turns the soil into a sea of thick mud. The cold numbs fingers, but not instinct. Over the radio, a desperate voice. "Pool, they're coming from the right flank." He responds with the calm he learned in the field. "Let them come, the mud works for us." The enemy tracks groan, trapped in the mire. Lafayette exploits the terrain, turns chaos into strategy. "Wait for the engine to sink, now!" The shot echoes. The explosion lights the night sky with a flash that cuts through the fog. Hours later, silence falls like a heavy cloak. The ground is covered in steel and smoke. Lafayette sits on a fallen log, cigarette between trembling fingers. A soldier approaches, covered in mud. "Sergeant, 17 more tanks confirmed." Lafayette does not smile. He just nods. "May God bless the soul of each of them, and each of us." The soldier walks away. Lafayette looks at the sky and thinks of his father, who used to say, "When the field hardens, son, the man has to harden with it." He realizes that the war has turned him into that, into stone, a man who no longer feels the wind, only its weight. That same night, Schulz sits in his office, face pale in the dim light. Before him, the notebook with grease and dried bloodstains. He writes, "They conquered the fear of failure. We worshipped it." Each word is a confession. The German genius, which once filled him with pride, now seems like vanity. He realizes that what decides a war are not geniuses, but ordinary men, those who repair, improvise, continue. It is the farmer, not the architect, the mechanic, not the inventor. Lafayette feels the same. As he gathers ammunition and prepares the cannons for the next offensive, he notices how his boys work in silent sync, as if they were an extension of the machine. One of them, Miller, hands him bitter coffee. "Sergeant, have you ever thought about going back to the farm?" Lafayette smiles weary. "I think about it every day. But when I do go back, I'll miss this noise." Miller laughs, not understanding. Lafayette looks at the cannon and explains, "This sound reminds me I'm still alive." The wind blows stronger, scattering smoke from the newly calmed field. Schulz, in Berlin, stubs out his cigarette and closes his eyes. He remembers the burned Sherman in Normandy, the smell of oil, the engine's heat. He thinks, they build like they're planting, we like we're sculpting. He finally understands that the war belongs to those who learn to harvest with what they have. Lafayette's radio crackles. "New orders. Advance at dawn tomorrow." He sighs. Another harvest. When he lies down, the ground is cold and damp. In the silence between gusts of wind, he thinks of what he has lost: friends, faith, sleep, and what remains: duty.
Schulz, on the other side, thinks the same. Two men separated by flags and beliefs, but united by the same moral exhaustion. Both realize that heroism is not in winning, but in continuing when everything inside begs to stop. On that October dawn, Lafayette writes in his diary, "Courage is not shooting, it is continuing to shoot, even when the body begs to drop the cannon." At the same time, Schulz writes, "Perfection is a luxury survival does not allow." They do not know it, but they sign together the symbolic epitaph of modern war, where ingenuity and instinct become inseparable. If you feel the weight of this story, the clash between ingenuity and courage, subscribe now. Here, every story revives the exact point where calculation meets the human heart, and war reveals who we really are.
The winter of 1944 arrives like an invisible enemy. Snow covers Europe's fields with deceptive calm, hiding beneath the pure white the scars of steel and flesh. Lafayette G. Pool, the Texas farmer, clears the ice accumulating on his M10's cannon. The cold is biting, the wind tears at faces and turns every breath into mist. The war no longer shouts, now it whispers, and that silence is the most dangerous of all. Before him, the Ardennes forest seems asleep, but he knows. Every tree can hide an enemy, every hill an ambush. His men are exhausted, eyes hollow, hands trembling. Even so, they follow. The end is near, and that is exactly why the fear intensifies. In official reports, Lafayette's name is a legend. More than 250 enemy tanks and vehicles destroyed. But for him, numbers do not mean glory. Every burned armored vehicle is also a reminder, the face of someone who will not return home. He watches his soldiers trying to warm themselves around improvised fires, and the smell of smoke and burned oil mixes with that of snow melting on metal. The war has stolen everything from them, except the silent hope of surviving one more day. Lafayette walks through the camp, cigarette between his lips, boots crunching on the snow. He runs his hand over the carcasses of tanks they repaired with parts from others and smiles bitterly. "These machines are as patched as we are," he mutters. Meanwhile, in Germany, Otto Schulz crosses the skeleton of a Henschel factory destroyed by bombings. The roof has collapsed, steel beams twisted like exposed ribs. He steps carefully over the debris and finds what remains of a Tiger II Panzer assembly line, the jewel of German engineering. The floor is covered in snow and ashes. A fallen plaque reads, "Production suspended, material shortage." Schulz kneels before an unfinished turret, runs his fingers over the cold steel, and closes his eyes. He remembers the Sherman he studied months before. What he once despised now inspires him. Perfection does not withstand bombings, he thinks. Simplicity does. He pulls the crumpled notebook from his pocket and writes between stained pages. Efficiency is the purest form of faith. They believe everything can continue, and that is what makes them invincible. As he notes it down, he hears the distant sound of sirens. Berlin is being evacuated. He knows the end is a matter of time, but he keeps writing because he must record what he learned before everything vanishes, that a nation is not measured by the beauty of its machines, but by the ability of its ordinary men to repair them. Back in the Ardennes, Lafayette feels the ground tremble. A mortar explodes near his position. Shards of ice and mud fall on him like heavy rain. A fragment tears his leg and he falls, blood flowing hot over the white snow. The radio crackles, "Sergeant, they're surrounding us." Lafayette swallows the pain, drags himself to the transmitter, and responds in a hoarse voice, "Hold the left flank. Use the terrain. The mud is our friend." Even wounded, he keeps giving orders. The battle drags on for hours. Every shot is a distant thunder. Every explosion is a lightning bolt in the snow. When the last shot falls silent, Lafayette is still breathing, lying among the wreckage, extinguished cigarette on his lips. He survives, but something inside him does not. Victory has no taste. It has weight. Days later, the survivors pull back to reorganize forces. Lafayette's body is treated, but his mind remains on the field. He watches the faces of his men, too young, too old, and realizes no one emerges whole from a war. Every victory is a disguised loss, he writes in his diary. The difference is that some lose more slowly than others. Schulz, meanwhile, walks the ruined streets of Cassel. Snow mixes with concrete dust and the smell of gunpowder. He passes a group of starving civilians and feels shame for the uniform he still wears. He opens the notebook again and writes, "While we sought eternity, they sought enough, and enough always wins." The words free him. For the first time, he understands he was not just a tank engineer, he was a chronicler of the failure of vanity. In January 1945, the Battle of the Bulge ends. The American Army resumes its advance. In factories across the Atlantic, 2,000 new tanks are produced every month. Germany, surrounded, manufactures little more than 300. Schulz watches an Allied convoy cross a nearby road and recognizes the engines he studied. He feels no hatred, only respect. The sound of those engines is the sound of the lesson he himself wrote. Lafayette, now on crutches, accompanies his unit's advance. The cold is biting, but the silence is different. It is the silence of the end. When news of the German surrender arrives, he is sitting on the rusty hull of a destroyed Panzer. He lights a cigarette, looks at the sky, and does not celebrate. He just watches. He takes a white handkerchief and ties it to the cannon barrel, as if sealing a cycle. "It's over," he says. But the tone is not relief, it is weariness. He understands he did not defeat an enemy, he defeated time. Kilometers away, Otto Schulz does the same. He walks to a hill, gazes at the horizon, and sees the final explosions light the night sky. "They won because they understood the common man," he whispers, "and we lost because we forgot him in the name of the machine." He tucks the notebook into his coat and walks on foot, leaving behind the empire he helped build and bury. When spring arrives, Lafayette returns to Texas. The field is quiet. The wind smells of fertile earth and gasoline. He walks to the barn, opens the door, and finds his old dusty tractor. He runs his hand over the steering wheel, cold metal under his skin. For an instant, the distant sound of a Sherman engine echoes in his memory. He smiles sadly and thinks, "I still prefer when the engine is for planting." The farmer and the engineer, two men who never met but learned the same truth, that war is not won by genius or force, but by persistence, that perfection is a luxury of peacetime, and that simplicity in the end is what keeps the world turning. If this story spoke to you, if you believe human ingenuity and quiet courage deserve to be remembered, subscribe now. Here, we don't just tell wars, we tell the price of what we call victory.